Okay, so keeping up with the latest research, it can feel like you're trying to drink from a fire hose sometimes, right? Especially when you're talking about something like arcv.org, with all those scientific papers. I mean, did you know they're predicting over 368,000 new papers just in 2025?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a real problem, even for people who've been doing research for a long time. We're practically drowning in information. But what if there were a way to get a handle on all that, like a cheat sheet for all that scientific research out there?
Well, that is what we're diving into today. We have this really interesting research paper about a new system called SurveyX, and it claims to use AI to create these amazing academic surveys. It's almost like having your own personal research assistant.
Right. It really is like having an assistant that can read and analyze hundreds of papers super fast. And the really interesting thing is that it doesn't just spit out a bunch of facts. SurveyX uses this really smart technique called a attribute tree to actually extract and organize the most important insights from all those different papers.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but I'm also a little intimidated. Attribute tree sounds very high tech. Can you break that down for me? How does that actually work?
So imagine you're doing research the old-fashioned way with a stack of index cards. You would jot down the key points from each paper on a separate card, right? Well, Attribute 3 is kind of similar, but it does it digitally. It creates this sort of customized index for every single paper, and it highlights all the information that's relevant to the topic you want to write your survey about.
So it's not just summarizing everything. It's like highlighting, the good stuff, the parts we actually really need to know. That's pretty cool.
Exactly. And that is super important because it allows the AI, the large language model that is sort of running things behind SurveyX, to really focus on the most relevant stuff. It makes the whole process so much more efficient.
So SurveyX has this very clever way of zeroing in on the stuff that really matters, but how does it even find the right research papers to begin with? Because we're talking about a vast ocean of information here.
Yeah, you're right. It's a two-phase process. Basically, first SurveyX needs to gather all the research papers that it needs, and then it has to generate the survey itself.
So how does it even begin to tackle this mountain of research? It seems impossible, like finding a needle in a haystack.
That's where things get really interesting. In this first phase, SurveyX starts by tapping into both online and offline resources, so it can access this massive database of over 2.6 million papers from arcsxcv.org alone.
Wow, 2.6 million. That's incredible. But how does it narrow all of that down to something manageable?
Well, it uses a combination of clever search techniques and filtering, so think of it like a superpowered search engine. You give it some keywords that are related to your topic, and it starts by using those to find papers that might be relevant.
Okay, that makes sense. But I'm guessing it doesn't just stop there. With 2.6 million papers, there are bound to be some papers that aren't relevant, right?
Exactly. That's why it uses this thing called a keyword expansion algorithm. So what it does is it analyzes the abstracts of the papers that it found initially and tries to identify keywords that are semantically similar to the ones you gave it, and that broadens the search even more.
So it's not just relying on my initial keywords, it's actively trying to uncover those hidden connections and find papers that I might have missed.
Yes, precisely. And once it has gathered this bigger pool of papers, then it goes through a two-step filtering process to get rid of any of the papers that are not actually relevant.
Okay, two-step filtering, what does that look like?
The first step is like a quick scan that uses what are called embedding models. It's kind of hard to explain, but basically it turns words and phrases into numbers. It's like a code. Then it compares the code for your topic to the code for each paper's abstract, and that allows it to quickly identify the papers that are most likely to be a good match.
So it's a super fast way to throw out the papers that are clearly off topic. What about the second step?
The second step is more nuanced. SurveyX actually uses the power of LLMs to analyze the content of the remaining papers, like the whole paper. So this makes sure that they actually align with all the nuances of your research topic. It's not just matching keywords. It's like having an expert double-checking the results.
So we've got this massive database of papers, a smart algorithm expanding our search, and then this two-step filtering process to get rid of the fluff and make sure that only the most relevant research makes it through. That's a pretty thorough prep phase.
Yeah, it is. And now this is where our friend Attribute Tree comes back into play. Now that SurveyX has identified the best and most relevant papers it needs to create those customized index cards, highlighting the key points from each one. This is the reference preprocessing step.
So with all of that research gathered and Prep SurveyX is ready to start working its magic and build you a survey. But before we get into that, what does all of this mean for you, the listener?
It means you don't have to spend hours going through endless search results or feeling overwhelmed by the sheer number of papers. SurveyX is doing the heavy lifting for you, finding and organizing the most relevant research on your behalf.
So SurveyX has done all that groundwork, sifting through literally millions of papers, and it's pulled out the research that's most relevant to our topic. It's basically like having a whole team of research assistants working around the clock. But then how does it take all of that information and actually turn it into like a coherent survey?
That's where the real magic happens. This is what they call the generation phase. And it all starts with something that you all do when we're writing, creating an outline.
Ah, so even AI needs a good roadmap to follow. Makes sense. But I'm guessing SurveyX doesn't just, brainstorm a random bunch of headings.
No, it doesn't. It's very structured. Actually, it kind of mimics the way a human expert would go about organizing a survey. So it starts by generating what you might call a high-level outline, focusing on the big sections that it needs to cover.
Okay, so it's got the big picture down, but a good survey needs more than just those broad strokes, right? You need the subsections, those deeper dives into the specific aspects of a topic.
Oh, for sure. And that's where those hints from the attribute tree come back into play. Remember how SurveyX created those customized index cards for each paper, highlighting the key points? Well, it actually uses those hints to figure out what subtopics need to be included in each section.
So it's like piecing together a puzzle, using those hints as clues to create a comprehensive and well-structured outline. That's pretty ingenious.
Yeah, it really is. And to make sure that the outline is really tight and avoids any unnecessary repetition, it uses this interesting trick that they call separate then reorganize.
Separate then reorganize. Okay, I'm curious. What is that?
So when you're outlining a paper and you just start brainstorming subtopics, sometimes you might end up with similar ideas that could be combined or rephrased to be more concise. Right, that's basically what SurveyX is doing in this step. It's like a built-in editor that streamlines the structure and makes sure that everything flows in a nice logical way.
So it's got this well-organized outline, all thanks to those handy attribute tree hints. What happens next? This is where the actual writing starts to happen, right?
Exactly. And you guessed it, those hints are still super important in this next stage, the content generation stage.
So those hints aren't just for organizing the information, they're actually guiding the writing itself. It's like SurveyX is constantly referring back to all those key insights from each paper as it's writing.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's like having this little voice in its ear saying, hey, don't forget to mention this important finding from this study. And while it's writing each section, it can also look back at the other sections that it's already written to make sure that everything stays consistent and connected.
It's almost like weaving a tapestry of knowledge, using all of those hints as threads to create this beautiful final product. I'm really starting to see how powerful this system is.
And we're not even done yet. Remember, SurveyX isn't just copying and pasting information from those papers. It's using the power of those LLMs to paraphrase and synthesize the information. It's creating this smooth and readable narrative.
So it's not just spitting out facts, it's actually like understanding the information and then expressing it in its own words. That's what makes a good survey, more than just a basic summary.
Exactly. Right. But even after all of that, there's still one more really important step in a generation phase, post-refinement.
Post-refinement. So that's like giving it that final polish, right? Making sure everything is super clear, concise, and ready to share with the world.
Exactly. And this stage has two main goals: improving the quality of the content and enriching the presentation. Let's start with the content quality first.
All right, I'm ready. How does SurveyX make sure that the content is as good as it can be?
Well, even though it does an amazing job of making sure that everything is accurate and relevant, there's always room for improvement. And that's where this technique called RAG comes in. RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation.
RAG, that sounds familiar. Didn't we talk about that earlier?
We did. Remember how SurveyX uses RAG in the first phase when it's filtering out those irrelevant papers? Well, it uses a similar approach here to refine the writing itself.
Ah, okay. So it's going back to those attribute tree hints, double-checking its work and making sure everything is accurate and well-supported. It's like having a built-in fact checker.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And RAG isn't just checking the facts. It also helps smooth out the language and make the survey more readable overall, like having an editor give it a final read-through.
Okay, so SurveyX has created this really amazing, well-researched survey, and it's even gotten a final polish from our virtual editor. What about that enriching the presentation part that you mentioned? What does that involve?
Now, this is where things get really cool, especially for people who are visual learners. You know how academic papers can sometimes be kind of dry, just walls of text? Well, SurveyX actually addresses that by automatically generating visuals that are super helpful, like figures and tables.
It can create visuals too. That's incredible. But how does it know what kind of visuals to make? It doesn't just throw in some random graphs and charts, does it?
Not at all. It actually uses the information that it's already gathered to make visuals that support the content. So, for example, if the survey is talking about a particular trend, SurveyX might create a graph to help illustrate that trend. Or if it's comparing different methods, it might create a table that lays out the key differences.
This is seriously impressive. It's like SurveyX is taking everything that's good about a research paper and then amplifying it. It's not just giving you the information, it's presenting it in a way that is clearly engaging and easy to understand.
And that's what we want, right? To make all that knowledge more accessible.
Absolutely. But all of this sounds almost too good to be true. Does SurveyX actually live up to all the hype?
That's a great question, and the researchers actually put it to the test. They did a bunch of experiments to see how it compared to other methods, and the results are pretty exciting.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat here. Tell me, how did SurveyX do?
So they found that SurveyX did a better job than other automated survey systems when it came to things like content quality, citation accuracy, and how relevant it was to the topic.
That's good to hear, but how did it compare to like the gold standard surveys written by actual humans?
And that's where it gets really interesting. So in some of the things they were looking at, SurveyX actually scored really close to the human written surveys.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So it's not just a cool tool, it's actually creating surveys that are almost as good as the ones written by experts. That's a huge deal.
Yeah, it could really change how we learn about and understand new research. Of course, no system is perfect. The researchers did point out a few things that SurveyX could still improve.
Okay, so what are some of those limitations? What are some things it can't quite do yet?
Well, one thing is that while it's much better at finding the right research papers than older systems, it can still sometimes miss a few compared to like a human expert who really knows where to look. Sometimes there are those like super obscure papers that are really important but kind of hard to find, and those might slip through the cracks.
So it's kind of like having a really smart research assistant, but one who might occasionally miss a hidden gem, which is still pretty impressive considering it's looking at millions of papers.
Exactly. And I think it just shows how important it is to have a human involved. Even with all these amazing AI tools, it's still important for us to think critically and, make those connections that only humans can.
It's like having a superpower, but you still need to use your own judgment and expertise. That's a really good point.
Yeah, definitely. But even with those limitations, SurveyX is a really exciting development. Imagine being able to get a full overview of any research topic in just a few minutes. Think of what that could mean for students, for researchers, even for people making policy decisions.
The possibilities are kind of mind-blowing. It could change how we learn and stay up to date. I mean, what if this technology could be used to make personalized learning plans? Like you tell SurveyX what you're interested in, and it creates a custom reading list for you, pulling out the key points from each paper and even creating those visuals we talked about.
That would be incredible. It would be like having a tutor who knows exactly what you need to learn and the best way for you to learn it. It could change education as we know it.
It really is amazing. And for our listeners who want to learn more, the researchers actually have some example surveys on their website. We'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely go check those out. It's really cool to see how this technology works. And who knows, maybe someday you'll be using SurveyX to create your own deep dives.
And that's a wrap for this deep dive. We hope you found it as interesting as we did. And remember, keep exploring, keep learning, and never stop asking questions. We'll see you next time.